December 17, 1944, 0530 hours. Hansfeld, Belgium. The Tiger tank's engine coughed, sputtered, and then died. SS Obersturmführer Banura Jochen Piper slammed his fist on the turret hatch, the metallic clang reverberating through the pre-dawn stillness. His driver, Unschar Weber, attempted to restart the 700-horsepower Maybach engine. Nothing happened. The fuel gauge showed empty. "Reserve tank is dry as well," Weber called up from his compartment, his voice tight with barely suppressed panic. Piper climbed down from his command tank, boots crunching on the frozen Belgian ground. Around him, the most powerful armored spearhead Germany had assembled for Operation Watch on the Rhine, the Ardennes offensive, sat completely immobilized. 67 tanks, 149 half-tracks, and nearly 5,000 of Germany's elite Waffen-SS troops, all paralyzed by empty fuel tanks. Through the morning mist, Piper could see the abandoned American position ahead at Hansfeld, a key supply depot for the U.S. 99th Infantry Division. The Americans had fled so fast they left fires still burning in oil drums, coffee still hot in metal cups, and there, arranged like a gift from the gods of war, were rows upon rows of jerry cans, thousands of them, the signature olive drab, American fuel containers. Piper approached cautiously, almost reverently. His adjutant, Hauptmann Hans Gruller, pried open a can and inhaled the benzene-rich gasoline as the men began the frantic task of refueling their vehicles. Piper walked through the stockpile, counting. The numbers were staggering. 50,000 gallons, enough to fuel his entire command group for the push to the Meuse River, enough to potentially alter the course of the offensive. The Americans had left behind more fuel in a single depot than most German divisions had received in 6 months. But as Piper watched his men pour the captured fuel into German tanks, a crushing realization came over him like the morning fog. If the Americans could afford to leave such quantities behind, if they could abandon what Germany would guard with entire divisions, then the war was already lost. Germany hadn't just miscalculated. It had fundamentally misunderstood its enemy. 6 months earlier, in June 1944, Albert Speer, Hitler's Minister of Armaments and War Production, had presented a report to the Führer that should have halted all offensive operations immediately. Germany's synthetic fuel production, the lifeblood of the Wehrmacht, had been systematically destroyed by Allied bombing. The Luna Works, which produced 175,000 tons of fuel in April, managed only 5,000 tons by September. The hydrogenation plants at Pitz, Bleihammer, and Bruck were operating at less than 10% capacity. The figures told the story of inevitable defeat. In 1944, the United States produced 1.8 billion barrels of crude oil. Germany, including all synthetic production and captured Romanian fields, produced only 33 million barrels, less than 2% of American output. The Third Reich was attempting mechanized warfare on horse-drawn logistics. Meanwhile, Major Friedrich Zimmern of the Wehrmacht's Logistics Command had calculated that the Ardennes offensive would need 4.5 million gallons of fuel to reach Antwerp. Hitler allocated 5 million gallons, but due to transportation difficulties, only half actually arrived. The German High Command was gambling the entire offensive on seizing enemy supplies, a strategy that exposed weakness rather than strength. The Americans, meanwhile, had built a massive logistical network, the Piluto pipeline under the ocean, and the Red Bull Express, a truck convoy system delivering 12,500 tons of supplies daily to the front. By December 1944, American forces in Europe consumed 1.2 million gallons of fuel daily and received 1.4 million stockpiling reserves, even while fighting. Piper was no fool. At 29, he was one of the youngest regimental commanders in the Waffen-SS, holder of the Knight's Cross with oak leaves and swords, and a veteran of the Eastern Front, where he had learned that in modern warfare, fuel was more valuable than ammunition. His command group had been designated the Schwerpunkt, the decisive point of the Ardennes offensive. On December 14th, 2 days before the attack, Piper attended the final briefing at Tiendorf. General Sepp Dietrich, commanding the 6th SS Panzer Army, was blunt. "You will have enough fuel to reach the Meuse if you capture American supplies." The fuel allocation for Piper's command group, 31,000 gallons, enough for only 50 miles of combat operations. The distance to the Meuse, 65 miles. The arithmetic of failure had been built into the plan from the very start. As his column readied to advance on December 16th, Piper issued strict directives. Tanks were to move in single file to conserve fuel. Engines were to be shut down during any stop, longer than 5 minutes, and seizing American fuel depots was the highest priority, even above tactical objectives. The contrast with American operations could not have been more obvious. That same morning, Captain James Rose of the U.S. 743rd Tank Battalion, stationed just 20 miles from Piper's starting point, noted in his unit diary, "Received fuel resupply, 8,000 gallons. Third delivery this week. Storage tanks already full. December 16th, 1944. At 0530. Hours. The German artillery barrage that marked the start of Operation Watch on the Rhine consumed more ammunition in 2 hours than the Wehrmacht had allocated for entire earlier operations. Yet even this massive display masked critical shortages. Piper's column began moving at 7:02 a.m., already behind schedule. Roads that appeared as highways on German maps were actually narrow country lanes, many unpaved. Within hours, traffic jams formed as vehicles built for the Russian steppes struggled through the Ardennes forest. At Lanzarote, Piper's first objective, they faced unexpected resistance from a single American intelligence and reconnaissance platoon. 18 men who held up Germany's most powerful armored column for nearly 10 hours. During the delay, Piper's vehicles sat idling, consuming precious fuel. When they finally pushed through and reached Hansfeld at dawn on December 17th, Piper's column had traveled 20 miles and burned 40% of their fuel. At this pace, they would be dry before reaching the halfway point to the Meuse. The American supply depot at Hansfeld was not even a major facility. It was a forward supply point for the 99th Infantry Division, classified by the U.S. Army as a Class 3B depot, a temporary fuel station. Yet what Piper found there surpassed the monthly fuel allocation for an entire German panzer division. Hauptführer Hans Gruller later testified, "We found pyramids of jerry cans, each holding 5 gallons of gasoline. They were stacked 3 meters high, stretching for perhaps 200 meters. The Americans had not even tried to destroy them." The captured fuel was high-octane aviation gasoline blended with motor fuel, 80 octane or higher. German vehicles, especially the temperamental Maybach engines in Tiger tanks, were designed for 74-octane fuel. The American gasoline was actually too potent, causing engine issues in several vehicles. As Piper's men refueled, further discoveries emerged. Sergeant Wilhelm Hoffmann found shipping manifests in the depot office. He could read English, having worked in his father's import business before the war. The documents showed the fuel had been shipped from Texas to New York, across the Atlantic to Liverpool, over the Channel to Normandy, and then trucked 400 miles to Hansfeld. The journey of over 6,000 miles had taken under 6 weeks. "I showed the papers to Oberstbahn-Führer Piper," Hoffmann recalled in a 1976 interview. Piper read them twice, then crumpled them up. He said nothing, but his face went pale. Both understood the meaning immediately. Private Ernst Kara discovered a stack of Stars and Stripes newspapers dated December 15th, just 2 days old. The headline celebrated the opening of a new fuel pipeline from Cherbourg to Verdun, capable of delivering 300,000 gallons per day, more fuel in a single pipeline than Piper's. Entire command group would consume over the course of the offensive. To grasp the impact of Piper's discovery, one must understand Germany's fuel situation by late 1944. Since May, Allied bombing had slashed synthetic fuel production by 90%. The Luftwaffe was grounding aircraft due to aviation fuel shortages. Pilot training had been cut from 250 flight hours to just 60. The German Navy's surface fleet had largely ceased operations, and U-boats were fitted with snorkels to run on batteries longer to save diesel. On the home front, private car traffic had been halted since 1942. Gasoline was so scarce that the Gestapo investigated black market thefts of individual liters. Farmers had returned to horse-drawn plows. Meanwhile, the United States was producing 67% of the world's oil. The East Texas oil field alone produced more petroleum than all of German-occupied Europe. American refineries were operating at such capacity that Standard Oil experimented with new petroleum byproducts simply because they had surplus crude. With the 50,000 gallons seized at Hansfeld, Piper's columns surged forward. They reached Billingen by noon on December 17th, capturing additional supplies, rations, ammunition, and most importantly, maps showing other American fuel depots in the area. But the maps revealed a troubling reality. The Americans had fuel reserves everywhere. Every major crossroads had a depot. The U.S. First Army alone maintained 3.5 million gallons in reserve. Piper advanced to Leonville, where his forces would commit the Malmedy massacre, killing 84 American prisoners. Even this atrocity was connected to fuel desperation. Piper later claimed he could not spare gasoline to transport prisoners. By the evening of December 17th, Piper's spearhead reached Stavelot, the site of a major American fuel depot containing over 2 million gallons, enough fuel to guarantee reaching the Meuse. But as the first German vehicles neared, American engineers were already at work. Captain John Brewster of the 291st Engineer Combat Battalion had received warning of the German approach. His orders were simple: deny fuel to the enemy at all costs. The Stavelot depot held 2,189,000 gallons of gasoline in jerry cans spread across 15 acres. At 16:30 on December 17th, as Piper's vanguard approached, Captain Brewster gave the command. Engineers poured trails of gasoline between the stacks. White phosphorus grenades were distributed. Technical Sergeant Paul Solis threw the first grenade. The explosion was immediate and immense, he recalled. A wall of fire shot up perhaps 100 feet. Within minutes, the entire depot was an inferno. Piper's lead tanks arrived to see a column of black smoke rising 1,000 feet into the sky. The fire would burn for 3 days, consuming enough fuel to have powered Piper's entire division to Antwerp and back. Unterführer Wober described the scene. The Oberstführer stood atop his tank turret watching the flames. He said nothing for perhaps 5 minutes, then climbed down and said, "They can afford to burn 2 million gallons to deny it to us. What are we doing here?" Across the Ardennes, American engineers were destroying fuel depots rather than risk capture. At Tuapon, 1.1 million gallons burned. At Spar, 2.5 million gallons were destroyed. In total, Americans deliberately destroyed over 8 million gallons during the first week, more than Germany had allocated for the entire operation. The ability to casually destroy millions of gallons came from a supply system beyond German understanding. The Red Ball Express had delivered 412,000 tons of supplies using 6,000 trucks operating around the clock. Each truck consumed 40 gallons daily. The operation itself burned more fuel than German Army Group B received in a month. By December 1944, the Motor Transport Service employed 230 truck companies running on color-coded routes. The system delivered 20,000 tons of supplies daily, including 3,000 tons of fuel. Colonel James Snyder, Chief Logistics Officer for First Army, recorded on December 18th. Fuel receipts yesterday, 1,847,000 gallons. Fuel issued, 1,623,000 gallons. Net gain to reserves, 224,000 gallons. The pipeline network was even more impressive. Operation Pluto had laid pipes across the English Channel, pumping 1 million gallons daily from Britain. Inland pipelines extended the network. The Sherbourne-Perry line delivered 800,000 gallons daily. The Seine line moved 650,000 gallons. By December 1944, Allied forces in Northwest Europe were consuming 7.5 million gallons daily while receiving 8.2 million gallons. They were accumulating reserves, even during offensive operations. As Piper pushed deeper into Belgium on December 18th, the impossibility of the German situation became evident. At Schauer, they captured another depot. 5,000 gallons consumed in just 3 hours of combat. Tiger tanks consumed 2.5 gallons per mile in combat. Panthers burned 1.5 gallons per mile. In the challenging Ardennes terrain, consumption rose by 40%. Helfer, Otto Dingler, maintenance officer for the 1st SS Panzer Regiment, recorded, "By noon on December 18th, we had burned 67,000 gallons since the offensive began. We had captured perhaps 55,000 gallons. We were operating at a deficit." The Americans, monitoring German radio traffic via ultra-intercepts, knew Piper's fuel predicament. General Courtney Hodges ordered all units, enemy critically low on fuel. Destroy all gasoline stocks threatened by capture. That same day, American C-47s flew 316 sorties, delivering supplies to Bastogne, including 160,000 gallons of fuel. Americans were flying more fuel to a surrounded garrison than Piper's entire command group possessed. By December 19th, as Piper's forces fought defenders at Stumont, the fuel crisis reached a critical stage. Tanks were being abandoned with empty tanks rather than from battle damage. Piper consolidated his remaining fuel, perhaps 8,000 gallons, enough for a single engagement or retreat, but not both. Meanwhile, Allied planners prepared for January operations. Brigadier General Maurice Gilland requested 245 million gallons for the coming month. The request was approved without question. The difference extended beyond sheer quantity. American vehicles were standardized for efficiency. Sherman tanks consumed 0.8 gallons per mile versus the Tiger's 2.5. American trucks got 8 miles per gallon fully loaded. Parts were interchangeable, and maintenance was straightforward. German forces, by contrast, operated a bewildering mix of captured and domestically produced vehicles with differing requirements. French tanks needed different oil than German Panthers. Soviet trucks required different parts than German Opel models. Each complication multiplied logistical challenges. On December 20th, Piper received a radio message. Fuel convoy destroyed by Allied aircraft. No resupply possible. Continue with available resources. Piper summoned his commanders. Sturmbannführer Vera Pertke was blunt. "We have fuel for perhaps 20 kilometers. The Meuse is 30-kilometer way." According to H.D. Murat-Gruler's testimony, the Oberstführer said, "Gentlemen, we are fighting an enemy who burns more fuel to deny it to us than we received for this entire operation. What we captured at Hansfeld, which seemed miraculous, means nothing to them. We cannot win." This realization spread quickly. General Hasso von Manteuffel, commanding 5th Panzer Army, later wrote, "When I learned Americans had destroyed 8 million gallons rather than risk our capturing it, I knew the offensive had failed before it began." Colonel Friedrich von Donder, captured December 23rd, told interrogators, "Your soldiers throw away chocolate. My men haven't seen chocolate in 2 years. You burn millions of gallons. We measure by the liter. How can we fight such abundance?" By December 21st, Piper was surrounded at Lays, his tanks immobile. American forces around him, the 31st Infantry Division, 82nd Airborne, and 3rd Armored, had a combined fuel allocation of 340,000 gallons for December 21st alone. Piper had perhaps 1,000 gallons. Private First Class. Richard McKinney wrote home, "We've got Germans surrounded who ran out of gas. Our captain jokes we use more fuel heating coffee than they have for tanks." The American response demonstrated industrial warfare at its peak. Patton's Third Army pivot north required 350,000 gallons just for redeployment, a feat considered impossible by German standards, yet accomplished in 3 days. December 23rd brought clear skies. Allied aircraft flew 2,000 sorties, each consuming fuel at rates that would have grounded the Luftwaffe for weeks. P-47s burned 300 gallons per hour. B-26 consumed 200 gallons hourly. One day's air operations used more than Germany's entire offensive fuel allocation. On the night of December 24th, Piper abandoned his vehicles and escaped on foot. Of 119 tanks and assault guns that began the offensive, 39 remained operational but immobilized. These were destroyed along with remaining ammunition. Oberreiter Heinz described the scene. We drained the last fuel from all vehicles, maybe 200 gallons total. The Oberstführer personally destroyed his command tank. Millions of Reichsmarks of equipment were lost due to empty fuel tanks. Of the 5,000 men who started with KF Group Piper, roughly 770 returned. They had advanced 60 miles, captured several depots, and discovered the reality of Allied logistics. News of Piper's discoveries spread quickly through the German command. On December 26th, Field Marshal Walter Model received reports about captured American supplies. His chief of staff recorded Model's reaction. The Field Marshal read the figures twice. 50,000 gallons at Hansfeld, 2 million burned at Stavelo, 8 million destroyed rather than captured. He said, "We are not fighting the same war." Hitler, informed on December 28th, refused to accept the facts. Speer wrote, Hitler insisted the numbers were propaganda. When shown photos of burning Stavelo, he claimed it was Hollywood trickery. But lower ranks understood the reality. Greer Wilhelm Hoffmann wrote to his wife, "Americans destroy more fuel daily than we receive in a month. They drive tanks like we march. This war is lost." The fuel crisis reflected a larger truth. By 1944, America produced 50% of global manufacturing. A new aircraft every 5 minutes, a ship daily, a tank every 7 minutes. Petroleum production statistics were staggering. United States, 1.8 billion barrels. Soviet Union, 110 million barrels. Germany, including synthetic, 33 million barrels. Japan, 2.6 million barrels. The Axis combined produced less than 2% of American petroleum. Every major German offensive after 1942 had been restricted by fuel. Every American offensive was backed by abundance. German planners could hardly imagine. Lieutenant Colonel Chester Hansen recorded a revealing incident on December 27th. A logistics officer reported weather had reduced fuel deliveries to only 500,000 gallons daily. There was concern, until someone realized this exceeded Germany's total offensive allocation. German POWs from the Ardennes were more stunned by American waste than by firepower. Witnessing GIs discard half-eaten rations or use gasoline for heating crushed morale more than artillery. Oberst Gar Reichelm told interrogators, "We knew your production figures abstractly, but seeing soldiers waste more than we had made them real." Every German who saw such casual abundance knew the war was hopeless. This knowledge circulated through letters despite censorship. Feldwebel Ernst Müller wrote, "Americans wash clothes in gasoline. They feed chocolate to dogs. They fire artillery for Christmas." We cannot fight infinity. This psychological impact undermined German racial superiority narratives. How could decadent Americans have such resources while the master race scraped by for essentials? During the Nuremberg trials, German leaders consistently cited logistics, especially fuel, as decisive. Field Marshal Kittel testified, "We had operational superiority the 1940-41. By 1944, we couldn't move forces for lack of fuel, while Americans moved armies like chess pieces." Piper, in testimony regarding the Malmedy massacre, revealed, "Every decision after December 17th was dictated by fuel shortages. We couldn't maneuver, pursue, or retreat effectively. Americans moved freely while we counted liters." General Heinz Guderian wrote, "When Piper captured 50,000 gallons, vital to him but trivial to Americans, the war was over." The story resonates because it marks when industrial warfare determined outcomes. Wars were won by production figures, not warrior courage. The romantic notion of combat died in the Ardennes among empty fuel tanks. Dr. Richard Overy calculated that by 1944, Allied two-axis production ratios exceeded 5.1 in major categories. In petroleum, it approached 51. These advantages could not be overcome by superior training or tactics. America produced 324,750 aircraft during the war. Germany, 1919-1970. Americans built 88 through 410 tanks. Germany, 46 to 857. Most strikingly, America refined 1.8 billion barrels of oil in 1944 alone, while Germany struggled to produce 33 million barrels. December 24th, 1944. As Piper's men slipped through American lines on foot, abandoning 39 tanks, 70 half-tracks, and 177 other vehicles, the scale became clear. They had captured 50,000 gallons, seemingly miraculous, only to realize it was insignificant to an enemy who could burn millions. Unterführer reflected in 1975, that morning at Hansfeld, discovering American fuel, we celebrated as if winning the lottery. By evening, learning of Stavolo burning, we understood we had already lost. Americans had so much they could destroy what we would have risked our lives to possess. The 50,000 gallons was less than a single American armored division consumed in 2 days. Less than what the Red Ball Express consumed in 3 hours. A mere rounding error in Allied daily usage. Major General J. Lorton Collins later noted, German desperate efforts to seize fuel revealed their misjudgment. They assumed we valued fuel as they did, as irreplaceable. They couldn't grasp that we had so much we could burn millions rather than risk a tactical disadvantage. Operation Watch on the Rhine failed due to the unchangeable mathematics of industrial warfare. The offensive used roughly 2.8 million gallons, 40% of their total allocation, subtracting captured supplies. During the same time frame, Americans consumed 267 million gallons, nearly 100 times more. The Wehrmacht lost 100,000 men, 800 tanks, 1,000 aircraft. But the greatest loss was of illusions. Every German who witnessed American abundance realized Germany wasn't waging war, but participating in its own demise. Piper survived, imprisoned for war crimes until 1956. On July 14, 1976, he was killed at his French home by unknown assailants. Yet in 1967, he told historian Henry Lehman, "Finding that depot was the worst moment. Had we run out earlier, we might have retreated with some dignity. Instead, we discovered Americans had oceans while we had drops. We discovered the impossible. The lesson extends beyond World War II. In industrial warfare, logistics outweigh tactics. Production eclipses courage. Abundance defeats devotion." The German soldier of 1944 was arguably better trained and more experienced. It didn't matter. Americans were backed by an industrial engine that could squander more than Germany could produce. This truth was reflected in every jerrycan at Hansfeld, every gallon burned at Stavolo, every pipeline across France. Wars between industrial powers would be decided by factories and refineries, not brilliant generals. Colonel Trevor Dupy calculated that in December 1944, each American soldier received daily support equivalent to 67 soldiers' worth of supplies. Each German got 3 pounds. Americans grumbled about waste. Germans would have regarded American waste as unimaginable abundance. In 1984, 40 years after the battle, veterans gathered at Lays. The museum displays Piper's Tiger tank, still where it ran out of fuel on December 23, 1944. Formidable. Unreitzia Karl Wortmann stood by the tank with former Staff Sergeant Roy Anderson of the 30th Infantry Division. "We always wondered why you stopped," Anderson said. "We thought it was tactical." Wortmann laughed bitterly. "We stopped because the tanks were empty. You burned millions to keep it from us. How could we fight that?" Anderson was silent for a moment, then said, "We never knew you were that short. We had so much. We never thought about it." That conversation captured the truth of December 1944. One side measured by the gallon, the other by millions. One fought for every jerry can, the other burned oceans. The outcome was inevitable. German records provide damning proof. Army Group B's War Diary, December 1944, December 16th. Offensive begins. Fuel 70% of minimum, December 17th. Piper captures 50,000 gallons. December 18th. Multiple depots destroyed. over 5 million gallons lost. December 19th, fuel critical, units immobilized. December 24th, Piper abandons vehicles due to fuel exhaustion. Meanwhile, First Army reports, December 16th, reserves, 3.7 million gallons. December 17th, 2.2 million destroyed. December 18th, 1.8 million received. December 24th, reserves, $4.1 million. Americans treated millions of gallons with indifference, while Germans rationed every individual can. Beyond sheer quantity, American fuel symbolized technological advantage. U.S. refineries had perfected catalytic cracking, producing higher-octane fuel more efficiently than German hydrogenation plants. American 100-octane aviation fuel gave planes a performance edge over German aircraft, using 87-octane synthetic fuel. Americans had developed additives that Germany could not replicate: tetraethyl lead, ethylene compounds, and diramide detergents. German engines, designed for lower-quality fuel, often ran poorly on captured American gasoline. Fuel shortages dictated every soldier's experience. Gerrit Hans Müller recorded on December 20th, marched 30 km, no fuel for trucks past abandoned American vehicles with engines running for warmth. They leave engines running. We marched through snow. Medical services were crippled. Ambulances couldn't evacuate the wounded. Hospitals couldn't run generators. Men died waiting for the transport that never arrived. Oberarch Dr. Wilhelm Kirsting testified, "We had excellent surgeons, supplies captured from Americans, but no fuel for ambulances. Men died who could have been saved with just 10 kilometers of transport." These discoveries shattered German propaganda about American weakness. Soldiers had been told Americans were soft and incapable, only to learn they could destroy more than Germany possessed. Goebbels' diary, December 28th. Reports indicate serious morale problems. Soldiers write about American superiority, undermining our narrative. Yet the stories spread faster than censorship. The myth of German superiority could not survive contact with American logistics. The Ardennes failure left Germany with no option but desperate defense. General Jodl testified at Nuremberg, "After the Ardennes, we knew it was lost. We had played our last card and found the enemy held all the aces." Recognizing German desperation, the Allies focused on destroying fuel production. By February 1945, German fuel production ceased. The Luftwaffe was grounded. Training was cancelled. The Wehrmacht became static, destroyed piecemeal by mobile enemies. Spring 1945 brought surreal scenes. German units surrendered due to immobility, not defeat. Entire panzer divisions sat helpless as Allied forces drove past. General Major Fritz Bohlin described, "We had 42 operational tanks, experienced crews, ammunition. We had 300 liters of fuel, not enough to reach the next town. We destroyed our tanks and walked to captivity." Meanwhile, the American advance was limited only by traffic from their vehicle abundance. Patton's Third Army alone had 15,000 vehicles. Camp Grouper, Piper's fuel crisis demonstrates how industrial capacity dictated the outcome of World War II. When Piper stood among captured jerry cans that December morning, he glimpsed the truth. They faced an enemy whose waste exceeded their needs. The numbers tell the story. German offensive allocation, 5 million gallons. Fuel destroyed by Americans, 8 million gallons. Daily American consumption, 7.5 million gallons. Piper's capture at Hansfeld, 50,000 gallons, 0.6% of American daily supply. The Battle of the Bulge killed 19,000 Americans, perhaps 100,000 Germans. It destroyed the Wehrmacht's last reserves. But its lasting impact was spreading knowledge throughout German ranks. America possessed incomprehensible abundance. Piper's discovery wasn't only about fuel, but about the nature of industrial warfare. Victory went to whoever produced the most petroleum, steel, and aluminum. Germany never had a chance. The final irony: American forces cataloging abandoned German equipment at Leyes found 39 fully operational tanks abandoned solely for lack of fuel. Major Robert Harrison's salvage report noted fuel required 8,000 gallons. Classification minimal. Source: local reserve. Time: 4 hours. What was impossible for Germans to save their best tanks with 8,000 gallons was trivial for Americans. A small allocation from local reserves exceeded Camp Grouper Piper's peak strength. This was Piper's discovery at Hansfeld. Not just that America had more fuel, but that American abundance operated on a scale making German scarcity irrelevant. The war was already over once American industrial capacity mobilized. Hansfeld revealed a truth evident since 1942. Germany fought the impossible, measuring defeat in gallons, while America measured victory in oceans. The Tiger tank now sits in Leglas's museum, fuel gauge empty, a monument to when tactical skill met logistical reality and lost. Visitors ask why such powerful tanks were abandoned. The answer: no fuel.